We know that most organizations have experienced drastic technological reforms, especially from around 2020 onwards. Faced with the pandemic crisis and the need to socially distance, companies have turned to several ad hoc solutions to facilitate remote and hybrid work. Since then, consumer preferences have also increasingly shifted toward a preference for more mobile communications, and customer facing workers have had to adjust. Now, these and other contributing factors have created new complexities for mobile communication compliance. Traditionally, perhaps the approach, for at least for some companies that have followed this, if you cannot surveil it, shut the channel off. However, I have to ask, is this the right approach, or not just for employees, but for customers as well? And what realistic alternatives could we explore? Our guest is well qualified to speak on these matters and much more, and we'll do that in just a moment. Hello and welcome to the Predictable B2B Success podcast brought to you by Sproutwood.com. I'm Vinay Koshy, and our guest today is Amit Modi. Now, Amit, you are the Chief Technical Officer and the Chief Information Security Officer at Movius, the world's leading provider of AI-powered secure mobile communications. You use a patented mobility solution to serve your customers better, staying away from crackdowns and keeping employees productive. Clients, the likes of T-Mobile, BlackBerry, BT, and Tier 1 banks are just a few. But you've actually worked with Movius for a while and had quite a few responsibilities, including managing strategy and evangelization, product management, engineering, technology partnerships, marketing functions, and sales. And during your tenure with Movius, you've actually helped drive more of a global reach, if I understand this correctly. And perhaps we can explore that in our conversation. But prior to Movius, you worked for an Indian company by the name of Wipro Technologies, again, if I'm not mistaken. I'm curious, given your time with Movius, was there a particularly defining moment in your journey with them? And if so, what was it and why?
Yeah, and Vinay, thanks for having me at the show. Would love to share. As a journey, Movius has gone through so many ups and downs, and I can think of many defining moments, but there were a couple that were pivotal. First is just our inception of Movius and this whole concept around how do you create this work and personal separation. So I would say the first pivotal moment was the amount of no's that I received that, hey, what do you mean by being able to create this alternative persona on a mobile device? That does not resonate very well. And as an entrepreneur, this is one of the first things we need to learn that if we believe in something, we need to be passionate about it and we need to be persevering about it. And I say this, it's a pivotal thing because it's very easy to give up.
Mhm,
But my simple responses would have been, hey, you've got a work email and a personal email. Why do you think this notion of having a work identity and a personal identity is so archaic or
mhm,
so not to be imagined? So that was the first thing. So we persevered. We said that this is something that can be done and something that can be done using 100% software, which was the second thing people didn't grasp
mhm,
because bringing real time communications 100% software based and creating this separation was not something that was done. The second, I would say, I know you asked for one, but as we evolve the product and as any entrepreneur would think, wow, the product is ready. We are now ready to conquer the world. And we happen to go after some of the biggest tier one banks. And we thought we were prepared. And this is my biggest learning. And when we engaged, they loved the concept. It was something unique, highly patented, had not been done. And we thought we are ready to rock and roll. And I realized how underprepared we were. And when you're dealing with tier one banks, they unleashed their power and understanding and that put us in a tough spot in terms of knowing that it's not just about creating a great product or giving a feature, it's about the readiness to serve the customer. So I'll pause here, but that was a very transformational period because that 6 months, as hard as they were, that's what hardened us, Vinay, and that's why we found ourselves where we are. So it's a story I would never forget because it's a lesson in mistakes
mhm.
and then how to better prepare for the future.
Well, that's very interesting. I'm curious though. I'd be happy to unpack this a little bit more. When you say
Yeah.
that you weren't prepared for tier one banks, are you referring more to their the technical requirements in order to integrate with their systems, or was it something else altogether?
Yeah, it was predominantly around the posture of security and
Right.
scalability with. Because when you're creating an innovative product and you have tested it, it works end to end. Functionally, it looks okay. But the kind of scrutiny and the rigor that these tier one enterprises, and especially if they are regulated verticals, the scale at which they operate and the kind of mission critical nature that we were serving for them, we just did not understand that scale very well and that security very well. And they had access to some of the best ethical hackers and they unleashed those on us, right? And so it's really around scalability and it's really around security and understanding where they are coming from. And I'm very thankful that they did that with us.
Brilliant. I'm also curious, given your journey to date, what would you say would be your personal area of strength?
Oh, are areas of strength, Vinay?
Your personal area of strength.
Yeah. I think first and foremost, two or three, and again, not trying to sound arrogant here, but I think being attentive to the
Mhm.
customers, listening to the customers is one of the most important things. If you partner well with them, completely transparently and with integrity, it's amazing how good that journey will become. There are going to be challenges. They know it's software, it's innovation. You are on the forefront of breakthrough technology. But if you are listening well to the customers, partnering well with them, and doing that with trust and integrity, that I would say would be my personal strength. I love doing that. And then, of course, the other part of it is having a team, and you need a team to be able to deliver anything for these customers. Again, listen to the customers, do it in a trustworthy manner, and have a solid team around. Those would be my strengths.
Certainly. In this area of listening to customers, what would you say is something that businesses don't know but should?
Yeah, I think again, customers would give you a lot of signals, right? And sometimes we get so caught up on essentially our own competence or thinking that we have created something breakthrough and there is a need for it. But what customers are going to tell you is that how this may fit or not fit in their workflows,
Mhm.
in their context, or there may be some subtle changes, and especially around B2B, right? When you are doing a consumer product, you're putting it out there and then you are doing the product led growth. But in
Yeah.
enterprise or B2B software, it's not just about functionality, it's about how it fits into their workflow and being able to contextualize and personalize it. And this is something that we miss. The other thing we might potentially miss is we may get too dragged down in a certain direction, meeting a specific need of a specific customer. You also need to know that whether is it repeatable or not across customers, because that's what is going to give you scalability as you expand the business.
So if I could put this perhaps in a different way, it's not just listening to what they're saying, but also understanding the context in which what they're saying fits into from a company perspective and perhaps even a personal workflow perspective. But then again, also understanding how one particular application can scale across the entire organization. Would I be right in saying that and also asking if, as part of listening, you need to be thinking on your feet and asking good questions to build up this entire scenario?
When I being able to think on the feet, because there were so many situations,
Yeah.
because thing about great and especially tier one customers is that they are getting educated by the industry.
Mhm.
They've got the wherewithal to have some of the brightest and greatest people out there, and they will challenge you. So you need to be able to think on your feet. You need to listen actively. Of course, you may not know all the answers, but being able to apply what you know well, what your company or product does well, then being able to evoke that confidence with them that, hey, I understand what you're looking for. here is what I can do. And also, if you don't know something, it's okay to say that, hey, let me get back and I'll get
Mhm,
back to you. But then that follow through becomes very important. A lot of times, the success is in how effectively you are following through. It's a combination of those two or three things,
mhm.
but you put it well.
Thank you, and thank you for that. You're really talking with, as far as Movius is concerned, around providing secure communications. Now, I think the term itself is fairly broad in today's world, but I'm curious, how have you seen this evolving from when you first came up with this idea of Movius through to what it is today?
It's very funny. The very first business plan that actually that I worked together with some of my colleagues was actually a completely consumer product. It
Right.
was a B2C product. So it's now if I look back and I still have that business plan with me, maybe one of these days we'll do a different version of it. But I think the need in the enterprise world was higher,
Mhm.
B2B, right? And it really stemmed around three key requirements. One is how do we help protect the firm and their interaction, right? While creating this work and personal separation. The second thing that I've seen evolve is you need to meet your customers where they want to be met. So it's really all about driving omni-channel engagement because the modalities have evolved. I think earlier in your intro, you were talking about in the past, even a basic channel like texting was shut down.
Mhm.
And if you look today, it's voice, it's text, it's WhatsApp, WeChat, Line, video. We are using all these modalities to engage with the customers. And it's not one time, it's about a point of time in the journey of that engagement, which modality is effective. So that's
Mhm.
the second thing. And third piece is all about productivity of the employees, right? And that has evolved significantly when we all used to be pretty much desk bound in the office. And now we are nothing but on the go everywhere, right? We are hybrid, we are remote, we are mobile. So these are all the things that have evolved, and we had to evolve our journey accordingly. The regulations have also become more stringent, so the posture on security, the threat vectors, etc., have also evolved. So we have tried to bring those three principles together and really taking the communications of the future forward. And hence, it's secure communications driving those three imperatives that I
Hmm.
spoke about.
Certainly. In talking with your tier one banks, you seem to find fit in that they were on the same wavelength as you when you had your initial conversations. But were there other instances where people took a while to come around to your way of thinking? And if so, I was wondering if you could share specific examples of how you've been able to help them navigate that mind shift.
Absolutely. Actually, I would say that even in the banking world or financial services in general, we had to fight some of the traditional approaches, right? Like one of which is, hey, just give another mobile device, right? And
Right.
let people carry a phone. So even there, it was not a slam dunk. But some of the other things, right? Carriers, telecom carriers, who, by the way, we sell through them, we partner extremely well with them. But very early on, they were a bit resistant to this notion, right? Of again creating this persona because they come from a very network defined mindset. So we
Mm.
had to change that. That hey, if you take this software oriented approach, it can actually open the aperture for you. It can create a broader business opportunity for you, Mr. Carrier, and we are going to enable that to you. You can have that high value, high margin, high sticky sales, but it is not something carriers think about traditionally, right? So
Mm.
that's one category I would say where we had to do a lot of work. The others are some other verticals, right? Like healthcare or even verticals like retail and transportation, etc. For these verticals to adopt highly differentiated, innovative, disruptive, software oriented communications while they are bound by a lot of regulations, it has taken us some time to convince them that the efficiency of this world today that we live in with software defined communication is much better than what historically they have used, right?
Mhm.
COVID certainly helped in it because that kind of opened people's mindsets towards a digital transformation, but it's not an easy ride. to convince B2B sales. You have to be persevering about it.
Certainly. What do you think has been the most effective? Is it just painting scenarios for clients in terms of the possibilities that could be, or has there been more of a more personal type approach that you've had to take?
Yeah. If I can take two or three, right? Because we're talking B2B sales, you can never assume that it will be a 1, 2, 3 meeting sales process, right? So first have that tenacity that you're going to have 20, 30, 40 meetings, right? Especially if you're talking about high and medium to large prices. So that's point number one. Point number two is no substitution to that high touch in person, of course, where possible, right? Like in the
Mm,
pandemic period, we just could not travel, but it's a combination. Now we can do a lot virtually, but that tapping of the shoulder or sitting together, doing the brainstorming, even till date, I haven't found a substitute for that. People clamor for that, and that kind of broadens the
mm,
conversation a lot. So that I would say is number two. Number three, which is a little bit more well understood, is show it and they will
right.
believe it, right? The days of PowerPoints, yes, they
Mhm,
have a place and time, but I think there's nothing better than actually showing it. And if you are actually a user of your own product, that gives a lot more confidence. I think that showing, which is then translating into believing, is very important.
mm,
And then the last piece I would say is quick follow through. So you had a meeting, what were the actions? That's more of a sales process thing, but it is, I cannot underscore the importance of good follow throughs. People buy from people. And if they see that you're being responsive, you're following through, you're taking actions, following through with your deliverables, they will remember you in a competitive situation. So very basic stuff, but it works
mhm.
in B2B.
Certainly.
Yeah.
I'm curious. I'm thinking of what you were saying earlier about active listening and what you just said. Uh, what would you say, or who would you say, has influenced you in terms of customer experience? Because you did mention showing people as well. So I'm curious, who or what has influenced you the most from a customer experience point of
No, I appreciate you asking, Vin. And again, I'll go way
view?
back.
Sure.
And I started my career as a software developer, then a systems engineer, and then I played all kinds of roles, quality assurance. Every role has taught me a lot. And then I transitioned into sales engineering. And I still remember my boss when I transitioned to sales engineering. Every week, on a Friday, he will get some of us together and said, "Who did you meet this week?" For the first few weeks, I did not understand why does he ask this question every single week. And he said, "I don't care whether you meet a provider, a service provider, a janitor, whoever, or a senior person. Who did you meet in that company?" And that stuck with me, Vinay. And that has been now be over 15 years, but a week hasn't gone by where I have not met like one, two, or more customers. So to answer your question, that has influenced the most. It was something I did not understand the importance of, and something I would always appreciate my boss for, right? Teaching me that invaluable. So hopefully that answered your question.
So, in asking who did you meet, was it just a focus around the people that you met, or was there more of a focus around the kind of conversation that you had with each of those individuals? Okay.
And it goes back to your question on active listening. What he was really teaching is go out there and interact.
Mhm,
It does not matter who you are interacting with. When you start interacting with your customers, you're going to understand better. You're going to learn a lot. You'll be present there. And that's what is going to lead to a follow on. Right
mhm,
now, as a seasoned salesperson, you'll think this is 101. But as for people who are making these transitions or entrepreneurs who are creating their companies, I say this because it is very transformational being out there and interacting consistently. So what he was really saying is you need to have multiple touch points. You need to listen, you need to learn, you need to follow through. and that it's all about the consistency. It's not one sentence. These were the messages I think he was giving in his
Well,
own very unique style.
and would I be mistaken in saying that that kind of philosophy has flowed into what Movius is today in terms of the secure communication across multiple channels? Would that be correct?
Yeah, it's exactly that, right?
Right.
Because you need to interact in an omni-channel manner.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Yeah,
So certainly.
absolutely.
Again, I'm curious from a business point of view, it certainly makes sense to communicate with people across different channels. However, some organizations are perhaps better at this than others in terms of trying to consolidate all that information into one source of truth that helps them get an overview of where each conversation is at and where it's progressing in your pipeline, so to speak. Now, I wonder, is that a challenge that often comes up in terms of trying to integrate a platform like yours with what already exists within an organization?
Yeah, it absolutely is, right? And I'll give two or three different aspects to this. So one is, let's start with the end users, the employees of that business, right? They could be themselves in different interfaces. They could be inside a UC solution like a Teams or a Zoom. They could be on their mobile applications. They could be somewhere else. So how do you enable all these different channels in the context of that employee, right? So that's one aspect of it. The second aspect of the challenge is you've got all these different channels of interactions happening. How do you ingest them? So just ingestion itself in a
Mm.
consistent manner and being able to piece it together is the second challenge. And then the third is being able to assimilate that information, and not just for supervision or regulatory purposes, but even to drive next best engagement. You need to piece it all together. You need to apply artificial intelligence to it, and then being able to say, okay, this would be based on all these touch points, the next best action that can be recommended. So the challenges, you're right, Vinay, come in all these three forms. So how do you simplify that, right? Would be
Mhm.
the next logical question. And this is where it's not just about providing a point solution on it or an application. It's about thinking through the platform and making it as open, as flexible, as ecosystem friendly as possible, right? And then it's not just, it happens overnight, right? You need to keep working through those integrations, opening up your APIs, making reconciliation as simple as possible, and then it evolves. So a lot of the value is not just in the app or the tool itself, it's in the power of the platform, right? And again, that's why software always wins.
Mm.
Software defined approach is what will take you way further.
Certainly. And you mentioned AI, so I'm curious. I'm sure you are deploying AI in the greater scheme of things with your platform. However, when it comes to workflows, and I would imagine that most large organizations would be incorporating something that you offer into their workflows, large language models, which probably everyone's familiar with, provide a level of assistance based on queries that are entered. And there is always the fail safe of, do you want to talk to a customer service rep, etc., and transferring the communication to an actual human. But I'm also curious in terms of actually helping increase productivity. Are you looking at perhaps leveling up AI so that it can intelligently provide input based on past interactions, as well as the overall workflow that has been suggested by an organization in order to make it a lot more productive for an actual rep or a manager, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. We are. And I think we are one of the, I would say, pioneers. And I'll give a very specific
Sure.
example to your question. In communications, I'll just ask you a question where if
Mm.
you ever had an issue with a drop call or bad call quality on your cell phone service provider, what have you done about it? I like, because there's no easy way to interact, right? Either you call an agent and it's a long way,
Mm.
or you just live with it knowing that, hey,
Yeah.
I know I'm going to experience some issues. So where we have applied AI, so if you now think from an enterprise standpoint, when they deploy a solution like ours, serving their end users very well, being responsive to them, analyzing the issues, and especially if you're providing a mobile solution with people on the go and needing our kind of mission critical service. What we thought when I was that we take all the telemetry, the information, feedback from the end user, like a thumbs up or a thumbs down on a call, leverage the power of AI, apply it from an end to end analysis standpoint. And within less than 2 minutes, we are able to actually close the loop back with that end user, saying that, hey, looks like you had a poor call. Here is what we analyzed for the call. Looks like your network could be an issue or far end could be an issue. To think about it, doing it for real time communication, it is not easy,
Mm.
especially in mobile telephony. So that's a very practical example of driving increase in productivity because now your operational overhead goes down for that enterprise.
Right.
Your end users have more near real time feedback. So they are thinking, yeah, somebody's listening to me and your system is actually working right with the power of AI. So this is one example amongst many others, how we have applied AI and actually given the power back to our customers, right? How they are benefiting from.
Right. I'm curious also, over the past year, what would you say has been the biggest driver of growth at Movius?
Okay, specifically, if you talk about Movius, the biggest growth driver are categorized into two or three segments. So, in financial services, then it has certainly been all the regulations, the fines that have happened to all the banks, right? You might have read about all the leading banks getting fined because their employees were using unauthorized channels,
Mhm.
right? And this is why shutting down a channel strategy does not work because ultimately, if I make money for the firm and my client demands a certain type of engagement, I'm going to want
Mhm.
to do that, right? But with solutions like Movius, then enterprises can actually benefit. So that in financial services has been very helpful for us to grow the business. In other verticals, there has been an increasing need also about cost efficiencies, people not wanting to be in asset management business, like managing physical mobile devices. They would rather have a software based solution. So that's been very helpful. Other thing, which is a little bit orthogonal, Vinay, but has been very useful is there's a big focus on ESG now, right? So sustainability. So the carbon footprint of these mobile devices that you and I use is pretty high. We ran some studies and it's a staggering number.
Mm.
So in our own way, with our approach of being able to almost taking two phones together and combining them into one, except using software, we have been also able to make an impact in that regards while driving efficiency and engagement and productivity. So these are the two or three reasons the focus on security always has been increasing. So that
Mhm.
certainly helps our posture in that regard. So these have been the reason for growth drivers for more.
I'm curious, as you approach some of these large organizations, I would imagine that you might be using things like account-based marketing to make inroads into these organizations. As part of the overall process as it evolves, are you focused around each conversation as it occurs, or are you also focused around finding champions within the organization? And if so, I was wondering if you could elaborate on how you do that and how that plays out.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of both, but I must also add that even if you do that, a relatively small company like ours, but very impactful, I must say, you still cannot be everywhere all the time. So a big
Right.
part of our go-to-market strategy has been since the big using channel partners. For example, we've got key strategic channel partnerships
Mhm.
with, like in US, it's T-Mobile. Outside, we have similar partners. You listed some of them early on in the introduction. So they now have their sales force who are in those interactions, as you spoke about,
Mhm.
right? So we have to make champions within our channel that, hey, I engaged with a customer and with Movius, the conversation was totally transformative and I was able to close a sale within X number of days. And oh, by the way, the implementation was so easy because it is 100% software based. So one is You create those champions, and that story kind of spreads on its own. So that gives you a lot of scaling. The second is, of course, you need customer champions, right? So if you have strong referenceable customer base, they come together and then the word of mouth spreads, they become your champions. And then the third is, yes, where we know that we need to be the trailblazers in different segments. So the first few opportunities we work very hard to close, create a template for a repeatable sale, and then we can hand that template to our salespeople or our partners' salespeople, and then it becomes repeatable. So it's a combination of those two or three ways
Right.
how we go about it.
I believe when we were talking earlier, you mentioned that transparency and trust were key to building out the successful channel partnerships. What is your approach in establishing yourself as something of a trusted advisor in the industry?
This is, I think, probably one of the most important points, Vinay, in terms of being those trusted advisors and having those trusted partnerships, right? So let me start with the channel partner part first, right?
Sure.
So they, it's tough to gain market share, a mind share, right? Like they are big companies, they've got a lot of products, and it's the flavor of the month, flavor of the week that
Yeah.
always occupies the mindset, right? But when you are there as a provider where you are really invested to see them succeed, you are bringing up opportunities for them, you are working hard on their behalf,
Mm.
and you are being trustworthy that if you are in conversations, you are transparently sharing them. If you have another partner, a competing partner, let's say, come to you, but if you're committed to this one, you say that no, sorry, and you bat for them, you fight for them. These things stick a lot, Vinay. They stick not just at an average level, but at a senior leadership level. And that's where then you'll get a lot of support and influence. And we have been very good about that. So it's almost like the handshake is worth everything, right? And when we commit that, hey, we are your partners, we don't look for legal paperwork to define that, right? We just go committed in that partnership. That's why they hold us in very high regard. And then, of course, you need to back it up with delivery, right?
Mm.
You need to success. In terms of customers, as I was talking earlier on, you don't become trusted advisors overnight. Nobody can
Mm.
become that, right? So you become one when you have consistently followed through, consistently delivered, and where you have failed, you have acknowledged your mistakes, and then you have done concerted effort to correct them and improve them. And not only that, again, these are very basic points, but if a customer needs something or help, you are going that extra mile to make their lives easier. That's when they start to trust you even more than they would normally do. So it's a two-pronged approach. Partner well with your channel partner and be there for your customer. I'll just put it this way, right?
Mm.
And that's when you become trusted advisor.
I'm curious though, especially with channel partnerships, there's probably a lot of partners with different bits of software, hardware, etc., that are competing for attention with their sales force. You've talked about a couple of points that would help stand out, but I'm curious for the salesperson, say with T-Mobile, it's a little bit of a, what should I say, a maze, if I could put it that way, given the plethora of choices available for each of their customers. How do you make it easier for them as an end user for the sales process in order to recommend your product above others?
Number one thing that always works is if you bring the customers to them. I
Right.
don't care which channel it is. If you are wanting to partner and if you've got hot opportunities or leads or concrete
Uh-huh.
opportunities or deals, and you bring to them, that is going to already set you apart because a lot of
Right.
times you've got vendors or providers trying to pitch products. But when you come up with deals,
Oh,
and you have shown that you've got customers and you think that already differentiates you. So that's the starting point. But then on a BAU process, which is the day to day,
yeah.
you have to create those playbooks because nobody, and this is true providers. Nobody's going to know your product market fit better than
Mhm.
yourself, right? Not expect the channel to be as good as you in internalize everything. So it's your job to make it easy for you, synthesize. So that's where all the go-to-market material, the use cases, the stories, right? The ease of narrating the story, those champions that you spoke about,
Mhm.
right? The those kind of things, it's almost, at least in our case, we had packaged all this material. And then of course it can be branded, templatized, etc. into the partners world. So again, make their work and life easier.
Mhm.
The third piece is training and enablement is important, but also very important, I would say, but also take them on the journey with you, right? In the deals, right? They'll obviously open a lot of doors, they've got a lot of contact, but they'll bring you along, build that trust that they'll bring you along. They'll trust you with information. And then as they start to see that, wow, this is an easy way to narrate the story and it is getting good receptivity, that's when they'll try to trust you more and get you in more and more opportunities. There are other tactical things, right? Like incentives,
Mhm.
etc. help a lot. So incentives, so those are tactical strategy. The last piece, which is probably very important, is executive sponsorship, right? Because in these
Mm.
big channel organizations, when it comes from the top and when the leadership believes that this is a good company to partner with, this is a good product that can make an impact to the top line or the bottom line, that kind of trickles through as well, right?
Right.
The last piece I would say, Vinay, is you have to be doing that constantly. You cannot assume that, oh, we had a great success this quarter means we have arrived.
Mm.
As you said, the month flavor of the week effect will take over. So you have to rinse and repeat this on a regular basis.
Brilliant. And you talked earlier about building a team, a good team around yourself. What would be your recommendations to other founders and sales folk, as well as the CTOs, if you will, in terms of being able to gather the right talent to further the mission of the organization?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are, for any tech company or a product
Mhm.
led company, right, there are two things that you will need at the end of the day. One is people who can solve complex problems, because challenges are going to come. Disruption is just around the corner. So we are always paranoid, right?
Mhm.
Tomorrow something could come and it could totally disrupt what we have created. People who have the horsepower to be able to deal with complex situations, because we just cannot anticipate anything, and who will be there in the darkest hour. So that's that tenacity, that mindset aspect of it is what I'm emphasizing, right? If you have those, then you'll be able to deal with it. So you need people with at least a few people on the team who you can go for any complex issues, right? And then of course with the surroundings. The second piece, Vinay, which is equally important, especially in B2B, and certainly I have seen more and more now, you need almost like technology evangelists or technology salespeople, right? Because people want to speak and buy from people who can speak their language, right? And they can really come as
Mhm.
solution providers, those trusted advisors. So you also need to have a good crew of people or good group of people who are very good technology salespeople, right? So they have the sales mindset, but they are still very pure in terms of what they are talking, but they can invoke a lot of trust amongst the customers. So I
Mhm.
think if you have to focus, these will be the couple areas that I would focus on.
Brilliant. This has been terrific. As you look to the future, are there perhaps developments or trends that you're seeing in this secure communication space that companies should be aware of? If so, what would they be?
Tell me, yes, there is actually two or three very key trends that are happening. One is communications is going to be happening, but which endpoints it happens on, that's going to evolve dramatically, right? The connected endpoints of the future. Look at our cars now.
Mhm.
That's a great example of a highly connected endpoint where there's a lot of communication happening. Similarly, like with plethora of IoT devices, distributed connected endpoints,
Mhm.
there will be not every communication will be the same, right? You're not going to make a phone call using that. But when I talk about communications, it could be mission critical communication, like an emergency call or a break fix call or some ambient situation triggered communication, right? So the
Mhm.
communication of future is going to be highly distributed and highly dispersed. So we need to be prepared for that. That's one thing that's happening. The interfaces themselves, we spoke earlier in this call, they are constantly evolving, right? I could be needing communication inside a CRM, inside a UC environment, on any other connected
Mhm.
endpoint. So as a provider, you need to be prepared to be part of those interfaces, not just always thinking that yours will be that interface. So I think that's the second thing I see. We spoke about AI quite a bit. It is, you are going to make it as intelligent and as contextual and as personalized as possible, right? So the AI is a means to that end.
Mhm.
And how you do that contextualization or personalization, we have to be constantly thinking about that. The experiences become very critical. I look at my daughter today and the tools and apps she uses and the interfaces that she's comfortable with. We who are selling B2B, we need to make sure that our experiences are as consumer like, even though we are serving an enterprise product,
Mhm.
but the experience has to be consumer like. So these are some things that are here and they are continuing to be.
Certainly. Okay. Brilliant. And I'm curious, as you have these many conversations with the various industries and other folks as well, are there perhaps a couple of areas around this idea of secure communications tied to business growth or revenue growth that you find doesn't get much airtime, doesn't get talked about very much? If so, what would they be?
Yeah, there are few that we are ourselves working on. I
Mhm.
cannot share a whole lot, but we are engaged with Department of Defense in US. So we are in some sense almost disrupting what we have done to take it to the future. So I
Right.
cannot share a whole lot,
Mhm.
but all I would say is the world of truly free distributed communications is something that is still not being totally spoken about. We have all talked about crypto and how having no middleman and really having trust based exchange in communications, if you think about it, it has not been done so far. So that's something very fascinating.
Mhm.
The other is critical forms on IoT devices, like voice enabling those, being able to have voice activated input. I'm not talking about the Alexas or the Google Home, but I'm talking about communication right from the endpoint, right on the go,
Right.
anywhere. That's not been still as much implemented. So these are some of the things that we are trying to get our foot in.
Certainly. Okay. Just on the last one, because it's a less security conscious, I would assume. Are you suggesting that a platform like yours would allow for some level of integration with the voice activated systems on a platform in order to allow for voice inputs on a specific channel?
Yeah, I'd give a perfect example. Think about smart infrastructure or public transportation or stadium or any of those settings. And when if you think about it, let's say there is a screech or a scream or a gunshot or some untowardly activity,
Mhm.
you won't have time to take out your mobile device and press 911 or whatever the corresponding emergency
Right.
calling system is, right? You need to have the intelligence to be able to either just or a school system is a very good example, right? Think about if an active shooter comes into a classroom, you're not going to be able to take your phone out and dial 911. You'll probably have a millisecond or sub-second time to maybe just make help or any sound like that, or maybe it's smart enough to detect the sound and then being able to trigger the communication from right there and then, right? Not even have
Mhm.
time to go to the cloud, fetch the information and then trigger the alert. So it's that kind of information and communication that I'm speaking about, which can bring public safety, which can improve our overall posture, both security and comms. Like these are the kind of things that are going to become important.
Certainly. So, in saying that, do you envision a future where Mobius would become not just B2B, but B2C as well?
Possibly, and it
Right.
could even be B2B2C, right?
Right.
So we could get the end consumer, but through
Yeah.
intermediary, right? And that's certainly something that we are working towards.
Brilliant. To wrap things up, if you were listening to this episode, what would you say would be your top takeaway?
Oh, yeah. If I was listening to this whole
Yep.
conversation,
Yep.
I think first of all, thank you. I think my takeaway will be you asked some very probing and insightful questions which would help any entrepreneur or anybody who is trying to create B2B. And I hope I was able to sincerely help in that regards. Like as much as creation of the product is important, the go-to market and the sales strategies and the customer engagement is way more important, right? So I think that would be my one takeaway. I hope the second takeaway is just be honest, just be truthful, be engaged with the customers. They'll also point you to solutions. You don't need to have all of them yourselves, right? Just be attentive to the signals. That would be my second takeaway. And my third, which we didn't talk as much about, but was implicit, you need to have fun along the way, right? You'll meet with a lot of great people, partners,
Mhm.
customers, your own team members, other stakeholders. We are in an ecosystem play. We are in a people business. And so interact with people. I think a lot of opportunities will open up. Those will be my three key takeaways.
Brilliant. This has been terrific. If listeners are curious, want to find out more or connect with you, where would you recommend they head to?
Absolutely. So for company Movius, our URL is movius.ai. So very simple, movius.ai. If you would like to connect with me, it's Amit, that's Alpha Mary India Tango. So AMIT dot Modi, MODI. So that's Mary Oliver Delta India at movius.ai. So Amit.modi at movius.ai. Would love to hear from any of your listeners.
Brilliant. We'll include links to that in the show notes. But thank you so much for doing this. This has been brilliant.
Yeah, thank you, Vinay. I really enjoyed the conversation and thanks for having me here. And I wish you great success
Mm.
in your endeavor.